Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's Video Podcast. Today is Friday, July 30th, 2021. And as I've been doing every day, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to try to look at today's New York Times, and I'm going to try to look at it on the side while I'm looking at you at the same time. I'm going to try to show you some of the pages in the paper without putting them up as an over-the-shoulder. The most notable thing about today's paper is the fact that it doesn't have a war on the front page, doesn't have a climate disaster or a flood or a major shooting. It's actually a pleasant paper for the day. The moves behind a gold medal performance. So the Olympic gold medal performance doesn't necessarily get good write-ups throughout the paper, but it's nice to see a front page without a big disaster on it. But the disaster, I think, comes a little bit further into the I'm going to jump right ahead to this section over here, and this is the infrastructure plan. What's in and what's out. Okay, can you see that? Can you see the infrastructure plan? And these are the two pie charts, or soccer ball. They look like little soccer balls over here. And this is the infrastructure plan. What's in and what's out. Now, along the way, there's a reference to Joe Biden and his compromise and his ability to compromise and get bipartisanship together. Let's take a look at these two plans here, just briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but just briefly. The original proposal is $2.5 trillion, $2.6 trillion. The bipartisan plan is $550 billion. $500 billion is half of $1 trillion. 2.6 trillion here is five times what the bipartisan plan has approved here. So what they've carved out or thrown away out of the plan so far, if they haven't killed the whole thing yet, home and community-based care, boom, get rid of that. Housing, school, and buildings, boom, get rid of that. Research and development on manufacturing. Seeing that we're such a manufacturing giant over here, let's not bother spending any more money on research and development. That I wonder how the Chinese are getting ahead of us. Boom, that's all gone. This whole side of the pie chart is gone. And over here, well, clean energy tax credits. Boom, gone. All the rest of these, almost everything here is shrinking. One or two things didn't shrink, but roads and bridges. 150 down to 110 billion. Railroads, that was one of the smallest drops, 74 down to 66 billion. Public transport, 77, cut in half, 39. Reconnecting communities, had been 24 billion proposal, down to 1 billion. Electric vehicles had been 157 billion, now down to 15 billion, 10% of it. The only one that went up with any significance was cleaning up abandoned wells and mines. Cleaning up abandoned wells and mines. I wonder how many mines are in Joe Manchin's little territory down there. So that went up to 21 billion from 16 billion. This was just absolutely unbelievable when you look at what's left out, what shrank, what got bigger. At the bottom of the page, climate crisis catches power companies unprepared. Now, a headline like this, you read this in the paper and you say to yourself, whoa, gee, I wonder what they weren't prepared for. I'll bet you start to go back, you find out that somebody in the company sent them a memo last year talking about exactly what the situation they're going to be in today. You find this all the time. This guy's unprepared because they threw away the memo that they got that was telling them to get prepared. Along that same line there, on the page right before it, they had this picture here that the year summer came with dread. The year summer came with dread. And there's a whole story about how wildfires, droughts, monsoons, sewage coming out. The whole season has taken an ominous turn. What they thought was going to be a fun summer season. Humans have become as great an influence on the planet as the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, says Anthony Barnowski, a Stanford University biologist. Now, there's a statement and a half. Humans have become as great an influence on the planet as has the asteroids that wiped out the dinosaurs. If that doesn't give you something to think about, I don't know what does. Okay, let's jump over here to page A14, and this was the A14 is the story about the Arizona vote review. Is financed almost entirely by Trump supporters. You've been following this a little bit, I'm sure. Mariposa County, the Republicans about 3 months ago were somehow able to have gotten hold of the ballots. And they've got this Cyber Ninjas group, which is completely Trump-backed group of crazies. And the money that they're using, this is real. Arizona review is financed almost entirely by Trump supporters. Well, that wasn't exactly a big surprise to read that headline, I'll tell you that. What's interesting is Trump is raising money under his PACs, but the money that he raises under his political action committees goes directly to him. It doesn't go to this Arizona recount. The Arizona recount money is coming from other Trump supporters who are directly putting money into this ridiculous recount that's going on. This recount has been going on, I think, since March or something like that. They've collected $5.5 million from 5 different organizations. $5.5 million from 5 different organizations, and they didn't want to let anybody know who was donating the money at first. And just this week they said, we are continuing our commitment to transparency, and they're going to order the sources. They're going to release the names of the people who are funding them. And they made it sound like they were doing this on their own. They weren't. They were ordered to do it. The Arizona court ordered them to do it a couple of weeks ago. So they're making believe that they're doing it on their own. They're not. People don't do this kind of stuff on their own. The whole report itself, the whole counting and everything, is being discredited by in-house Republicans, right and left, that are in Arizona. The state senator has called it botched. The Secretary of State has quit. A total lack of competence. One thing after another. The Federal Justice Department has issued these quasi-warnings about how the illegality of what they're doing. I don't know why the Justice Department hasn't jumped in and stopped this whole thing, but it hasn't as of right now. According to Cyber Ninjas, I mean, this is like lunacy world we're dealing with. The largest donation, $3.25 million, was made by a group called the American Project. And it's a Patrick Ryan, who's the former chief executive of Overstock. Overstock's one of those companies that was selling, they were buying large amounts of goods that they had in Overstocks, and they would sell them cheaper. This guy was also involved with, if you remember Maria Butina, the woman who was involved with the NRA about 2 years ago. It turned out she was a Russian spy, and she was infiltrating the NRA, because the Russians have been infiltrating the NRA for years. And she was out of, I think she was in Minnesota is where I'm thinking she was mostly out of. A gun rights activist who was jailed. She was jailed in 2018 as an unregistered foreign agent for Russia. And anyway, this guy has been dating her, and he has an intimate relationship with her. So the biggest supporter to attempt to overturn this election, who's given money to Cyber Ninjas, which is a QAnon group, is this guy who's got a relationship with a Russian spy. You can't make this stuff. And then last year, there was another group called America's Future, and this is a Michael Flynn group. Mike Flynn is the chairman of this group. They've got almost $976,000, almost $1 million there. An additional 600 came from Voices and Votes. Christian Robb, a pro-Trump television network that's connected with One American News. A fourth group donated $500,000. And these are the people that are tied to Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell is the lawyer that Trump, the female lawyer, that Trump has used, and she's been the one who's been heading up this whole thing in Michigan, where they've been attempting to, where the judge in Michigan is accusing these people of taking out a frivolous lawsuit in order to raise money, and the attorney general or the judge, I'm not sure here, is attempting to get their law licenses taken away. So all of these groups have intimate ties either to Flynn, who has Russian ties, or the first guy who's got Russian ties. The third one, One American News. In fact, One American News, there were some minor little Russian connections with them when they first made their appearance on the scene that we saw. The whole group is foreign influenced, money people are funding this whole thing, and the whole thing is turning into a complete joke. And the biggest thing they're doing out of it is raising money from other people. By showing that they're doing these investigations, they keep raising more money. All right, I'm going to turn back around for a second. I'm going to jump over to the editorial page. The front page, you notice the front page on the New York Times, the upper left-hand corner, the little box there, it says, all the news that's fit to print. Well, there's a fellow, I think Larry Bensky on KPFA many years ago used to do a morning show every Sunday morning, and he would read the New York Times, and it would be all the news that's fit to spit was the expression he used. The other expression frequently used is all the news that fits. I get the New York Times delivered every day. I think it's the essential starting point to figure out where we're at and where we're going. It is the paper of choice in America. It's followed closely by the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. There's maybe the LA Times now and then. There's a few papers that are out there. The New York Times probably has the biggest distribution of all of these papers. It is the establishment. It's the voice of the establishment, the rational establishment. And the reason I say that is you have to put a certain amount of correct news in the paper for the financial people to make their decisions. And that's what this is sort of all about. That's why you have to have the truth in the news. Now, the guys that's making decisions on about buying and selling his stock isn't sitting there watching Fox News all day. Believe me, he's reading the Wall Street Journal. He might be checking in with the New York Times. More than likely, he's reading the Wall Street Journal, and that's it. Or the Financial Times. The point is, this is the paper of the establishment. Everybody gets it. All the news outlets read it. People look at it, people comment on it. It's a common point to take off from. Fox News is not a common point to take off from. Fox News is an aberration of everything that's representative of news or reporting on any level. So I'm not saying that the New York Times, you need to read this to find out what's going on, but you need to find out what the mainstream is actually thinking and what the starting point is. It's not Tom Hartman, it's not Jim Hightower, it's not the Progressive, it's not Mother Jones. But those are the things you want to read to back up what you're seeing here in the paper. Okay, I want to jump to the editorial page. I usually read the front page in the news, and the wife frequently jumps. She'll jump right to the editorial page. California can solve this homelessness crisis, and this is a Ned Resnikoff, who's part of a homelessness and housing initiative group out of UC Berkeley. And what he's saying is homelessness is solvable. The primary driver for homelessness, according to him, is housing unaffordability, not a sudden increase in mental illness. It's not mental illness. It's not substance abuse. It's not a lot of these claims to the contrary are always saying that people are homeless because they suddenly became an alcoholic, they suddenly got a mental disease, they suddenly this, suddenly. It's not a sudden thing. It's not a sudden thing. And this has been going on for a long time. Housing unaffordability has been going on, especially in California. California probably has the largest, it does. It has the largest, it's a 40%, I think. 28% of unhoused population are in California, in unsheltered homeless population. 28% unhoused population. More than half of the country's unsheltered homeless population resides in California. Well, where are you going to be, in Alaska? What, are you kidding? The federal government, most recent point in time, there were 113,000 people unsheltered a few months ago in California. And he's saying the primary driver for this is housing unaffordability. Now, I can't argue that housing unaffordability is a primary driver, but I don't think it's the main one. And he starts here and he goes back into a story about how Berkeley started with this single-family zoning, which he's basically saying has led to part of the crisis. And in Berkeley, they're trying to undo this, what they put in. He says, income inequality may fuel homelessness in regions where housing supply fails to keep up with demand. The wealthiest households in an unequal city bid up the cost of housing for everybody else, making it increasingly unaffordable to lower income residents. This is exactly what happened and has been going on in San Francisco for the last 10, 15 years. As Silicon Valley, which is south of San Francisco, started, people in Silicon Valley were making, a lot of people were making tons of money. They were tired of living out there in the suburb. They wanted to get part of the city. So they started moving into the city. So as soon as they did, the big high-tech companies started to special buses, special ferries, all sorts of things to ferry these people and move them back and forth. Well, meanwhile, these people are coming in to San Francisco with their $150,000, $250,000 a year salaries, their $1 million packages. Well, they're bidding up the prices of the rental market. So suddenly, what would have cost $1,000, for maybe a one-bedroom apartment in the Mission, suddenly it's $2,000, $2,500. Same thing happened in New York City years ago. Same thing happens in all these big cities. The wealthy people come in at a certain point and start to gentrify. And they take over the old, which suddenly becomes very attractive, and the brick wall is suddenly the in thing to have, So as they drive up the prices, the people who you need to run the city, the people who, work in the restaurants or teach in the schools or clean the streets or drive the cars or the cabs, the people that run the city, they can't afford to live there anymore. And as that happens, some of them move further out and some of them wind up falling between the cracks, and you wind up with homelessness increasing. State and local politicians need to take homelessness seriously as not only a humanitarian disaster, but as a threat to liberal democracy. I was driving around San Francisco years ago with a baker friend who worked with me on the Twinkie project. And he was from Germany, and he had been traveled all around the world. He could not believe the state of homeless people that were living on the streets in San Francisco. Like I said, we went to this food show, which was south of Market. And as we went there and then came back, I drive through the Tenderloin area, and there's literally, dozens of people living on cardboard boxes and tents, or cardboard boxes and another cardboard box on the streets in San Francisco. He was absolutely flabbergasted, never seen anything like it, couldn't believe it was going on in America. I had not been that aware of the European attitude towards the homelessness as I was after hanging out with my friend for quite a while. I had seen this in New York growing up, and it's not a big surprise to figure out that the wealthier concentrations of money you get, the more you wind up with poverty. They go hand in hand. There's only so much of a pie. There's only so much energy. You can't create any more energy. You create the wealth by doing things, by making things. That's how the wealth originally starts to get created. And in the markets we live in today, the wealth is getting created by people that are trading on the wealth that's being created. They're guessing on it. They're making bets that it's going to increase. They're doing all these, casino-like things. What people refer to as, like a gambling. That's what Wall Street is. It's a casino. So they're gambling on these people keeping to work. If they're not gambling on these people keeping to work, then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to rely on the feds to keep them going. And this was the day before's paper, and this has got to do with the Fed signaled it will ease its support for the economy. Since 2008, I've talked about this once or twice. Since 2008, we've had this concept called quantitative easing. And basically, what's going on is the Fed is basically printing money out of nothing. They are buying bonds from the corporations, and they're buying them with zero interest. So the corporations have been getting all this money since 2008, which is why the corporations and Wall Street are doing so good. So we're going to give all this money to these large corporations. Well, for sure, they're going to go out and create a bunch of jobs for everybody, right? Hello? What are you kidding? They haven't even thought about that. These guys have gotten all this money, and the whole concept was, yeah, they're going to expand their businesses, they're going to create jobs, they're going to make more products, blah, 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 blah. What a bunch of BS. None of that's been happening. What they've been doing is buying back their own stock. Okay, so the company's worth so much money here. So we suddenly get a big influx, a big infusion of money to the company that they don't have to pay any interest on. Well, what do they do with the money? They buy their own stock. They buy their own stock. By buying their own stock, they put more pressure on the stock to raise the value of the stock. Supply and demand. As the demand increases and there's only a certain amount of supply, the price is going to go up. Supply and demand curves. It's not rocket science here. So these guys are getting all this money. They're buying their own stocks. The companies aren't worth any more. They're not making any more things. They're just worth more money on paper for this group of people. It's a huge bubble. And I talked about this last week. I might talk about it next week. If you have a chance, catch the show. A Frontline did a 1-hour show, I think July 13th or the 17th, around there, on this whole issue about quantitative easing. It's a huge bubble, and it's been growing for 10, 11, 12, almost 14 years now. Since 2008, this bubble has been growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's going to make the old bubble look like a blip. All right, that was the federal easing. I'm going to go back to the paper from today's paper, the Saturday paper. What's ripping American families apart? And David Brooks is pretty much talking about 27% of Americans are estranged from members of their own family. 40% of Americans have experienced estrangement at some point. He goes here, somebody on BBC, I try to put my needs first rather than trying to fix things beyond my control. But yes, I'm angry. I didn't get the mother I wanted. This whole story is about people complaining about their parents complaining about their kids. Our family, school, politics, and even our sports are vulnerable to all of these political mishigash that's going on right now. Anxiety, depression, anger are hard to deal with within the tangled intimacy of family life. But political tribalism became a mechanism with which people can shore themselves up, vanquish their shame, fight for righteousness, and find a sense of belonging. So, if your mother didn't raise you the way you think she should have raised you, or your father didn't treat you like he should have treated you, or you came from a family that didn't give you everything you needed, I would advise you to go out and maybe check with QAnon. You might find that they have what you need, like a lack of brains and a lack of will and a lack of determination. They'll fill it all in for you and you'll be able to go through your life. When I first read this, what struck me was myself and my relationship with my sister. We both grew up in the same house. We shared the same bedroom. She was 7 years older than me. And when she tells her story about growing up and I tell my story about growing up, our parents seem to be two completely different people. You would think we were raised in two different families. And in a sense, some of that happens locally for me. Also, I have a son and a daughter, and when you talk to both of them, you'll frequently find that they may have come from two different families themselves. It's sort of interesting. Okay, well, we've had it for 24 minutes, and I had nothing real terribly positive. Let me swing over here 1 second to this little, they don't want to hold your hand. This was let me go back to here. We'll get back. Whoops. Let's go back here. Got to make sure I get the camera right because, whoops. Yeah, I blew it there for a second. Okay. The Sunday Times this week was it was not an interesting paper. It hardly had anything interesting in it. There was 1 or 2 articles in the front section that weren't bad, but the one that jumped out at me the most was they don't want to hold your hand. And this was really a neat little article, and the reason it affection plays a huge role in relationships, and it takes a lot of work. More than half of the cuddle party attendees, they're talking about these cuddle parties that they have where people, it's non-sexual and people are cuddling together. Diane and I are great cuddlers. In fact, years ago when we first got married, we sort of joked about how we would retire by getting a bed and cuddling in the window at Bloomingdale's in the evening. We would do that for our retirement. We would cuddle in bed. We're great cuddlers. We hold hands. We don't always agree about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we hold hands, we cuddle, we kiss, we love each other, and touching is good. Touching is good. You don't have to have you don't have to have things every sexual to be touching. And touching, when you meet somebody and you shake their hand or you hug somebody, or all of these type of affection things are really, really essential for people to have a good state of mind. If he only touches you in sexual activity, you're missing out on a basic human need. They don't want to hold your hand. Sunday Times, July 25th. If you're in a situation you want to find out more about how valuable cuddling is, check it out. That's it for today. Peace, patience, persistence, and we'll post a couple of more shows before the weekend's over, hopefully. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me today on the News Catch-Up Day. Bye now.